Most advertising is annoying, it's disruptive, and it only justifies itself if the product you purchase at the end of it makes up for the annoyance factor of the ad. So you either typically educate somebody or you sell somebody. It's hard to do both. The webinar is a way to do that, to lead with value first. Well, what better way to prove your value than to actually demonstrate it? And then after you do that, make the offer at the end of the webinar. So I just liked it. I thought it was a great coaching tool. I thought it was a way to add value to the marketplace and differentiate myself. And 2008 was that perfect time where the technology was just there. Prior to that, I mean, you would be lucky if the thing didn't crash on you when you did a webinar. And also internet connections were too slow to kind of like stream up and down both video and audio and all that jazz. So 2008 was that perfect opportunity. And Chris, I was brand new in 2008. So I didn't have any previous successes that I could rest on and rely on. I always think of how like Tesla took over the automotive industry. They were fresh. So they didn't have any preconceived biases. They didn't bring in the baggage. So they were innovative and adaptive. So I wasn't already a person that could sell from the stage or the platform, which is an in-person kind of seminar environment. So I didn't have those things guiding me. I wasn't a teleseminar guru, which at the time was the hot thing online. I always felt that was transitory, that it wasn't going to last. And so I sat down with a blank paper and I was like, let's figure this out from scratch. And so that's allowed me to develop techniques that now are industry standards. But back then I didn't have a rule book or a playbook to read. I had to get on there and grind it out.
The cool thing about that is, when you look back to 2008, so I'm a little older, I'm 45. So, I was, financial advisor, pro snowboarder. I was doing a lot of really cool things at that time. And webinars weren't really something that we did a lot of. I remember seeing webinars or having at the financial firm, they would, have consultants do webinars but most of them would still travel and do seminar type styles. They would teach us in seminars, but we did start seeing that webinar style come. And I don't really remember back to that point as to whether or not I got more from an in-person or from the webinar, but it was a really unique time because that was right during the Great Recession. So there was a lot of knowledge people were seeking, but they couldn't just get it because, well, quite frankly, a lot of people weren't traveling just because there wasn't the money. The businesses were hurting. So it was a unique dynamic to launch a webinar business because I think it was number one, cost effective, not just for individuals, but for big corporations, especially in the Wall Street world. So that's why they started doing it. But like, where did you find your way? Because when I think of webinars and I read a lot of books. So when I really kind of hooked onto this and said, there's something to this was Russell Brunson, ClickFunnels guy. I read one of his. Yeah, exactly. I read his book where he's talking about the potato gun, how he did a webinar every single week, the same day, the same time, selling a potato gun. First time, like there's hardly anybody there. The next time, a couple more. The next time, a couple more. But then he went on to sell lots of potato guns. And obviously now clearly did pretty well for himself. But he started with webinars. That's how he did it. So I just said, hey, if that guy can do it, I can do it. And I remember I did the same thing with the infinite banking stuff that I teach. I said, every Wednesday at 1 p.m., I'm going to do a webinar. Now, back then, from what I learned in the book, I was going to do the exact same webinar. Now that was, when would that have been? 2019, 2020. That'd be a pretty boring thing if I did the exact same webinar each time. So I've had to evolve it. But let me put the spotlight back on you. And I kind of want you to walk through what it is you do, like how you've perfected webinars. And then let's just teach everybody something here and give them tremendous value.
That's wonderful. So, and it's funny you bring up Russell. So in his book, Expert Secrets, you can see I'm quoted in there significant portions with closes on webinars that I used. And in fact, with ClickFunnels, the piece of advice I gave Russell that really helped him, and we can dive into this further, is they were selling ClickFunnels and they were struggling with it. I said, make the software free and sell a product instead. And then you'll bypass all these issues of making the software. Well, what level should I pick? And should I upgrade it or should I not upgrade it? It's like, give the best thing away for free and teach everything else and then show what you taught there. You can buy this product and then you get this even better thing for free. And it revolutionized their business. And I have many, many case studies of people that I helped in the webinar space because I focus just on that, right? Not to teach it, by the way. I was using it. And then people kept saying, man, can you teach it? Can you teach it? Can you teach it? Can you teach it? So that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to teach what we consider the best, most, the biggest levers of webinars, right?
Love it.
And the first one is what we already talked about, is the offer. If you could sell a $10 bill for $1, Chris, how good of a salesperson do you have to be?
Not very good.
You kind of got to just convince them this thing ain't counterfeit, right? And you're like, hey, listen, I'm a monk. I'm now renouncing all material possessions. I got all this money. Can you take it off my hands? I just need a little bit to travel to an ashram in India. So just take all of it, etc., and then relieve me of this burden. Like, anybody would say yes to that offer. Now, we can't quite get there most of the time in our businesses. So we want to construct, before we sit down and create the webinar, we want to have the strongest offer possible. And that's where we start. Now, I want to loop back real quickly to something you said earlier. Let's talk about the hierarchy of the most effective ways to sell anything. The first one is one-to-one, in-person, nose-to-nose, toes-to-toes. You just can't beat it. And there's a variety of reasons for that. One is because of that personality and that rapport you can establish in a three-dimensional world. But the other reason is because you can calibrate. So if price isn't an issue for them, you don't have to spend 20 minutes justifying price or juxtaposing value to price or doing anything related to the cost. But if that's their primary consideration, then you could tailor the presentation specifically to that individual, right? The only downside of that is it's grunt work. It's long, hard, manual labor. So while it's extremely effective, it's highly inefficient.
I couldn't agree more. And it brings me back to like the financial advisor days. I went and saw people face to face, toes. What did you say? Toes to toes, nose to nose. I love that. I love that. And I did that at kitchen tables, and I had a lot of success with that. But you could only serve so many people compared to today, where we serve thousands of people. We could never do that nose to nose. So I love that's called out.
So that's like a one-to-one scenario. So one-to-one scenarios are always going to be superior in terms of effectiveness to one-to-many scenarios, but one-to-many scenarios are more efficient. So then let's talk about one-to-many scenarios in a room with people is always going to be more effective than virtual. But the downside to that is you got to get a room, you got to travel to that room, you got to put everybody in that room.
Cost money.
And so again, highly effective, but not very efficient. And I think you should do it. Don't get me wrong. A webinar is a tool in a toolkit. And as you grow over time, you should develop a toolkit with lots of tools. So that way it's not I got to hammer everything as a nail scenario, the right tool for the right job. I've just found that for efficiency and effectiveness, the webinar seems to be the most leverageable tool. Because listen, whatever you're selling, the offer is the most important thing. How do I make this thing so good it would cost them more not to buy it than to buy it? So we start there anyway. And now what's great about it is on a webinar, it's usually easier to demonstrate that. But let's drill in a little bit further. Offers are only valuable related to the context in which they're presented. So I can't sell a Bible to a Muslim very easily. It's just the wrong offer to the audience. I can't sell the cure for male pattern baldness to a female audience. It just doesn't work. And so what I like about webinars is we can hyper contextualize the information to that segment of the marketplace. I'll give you an example. 2015, we did this promotion as an affiliate. So I was using webinars to sell other people's products. And not just my own. So we were selling this product. It was $5,000 and we got $2,500 every time somebody bought that through our affiliate link. So we didn't even have the creator of the product show up on these webinars. Every other affiliate was promoting their sales material. We created our own. So we created our own webinars. And one of the webinars that I did was I was selling it to the general business market. Like, hey, listen, start this type of business online if you're looking to start, or add this type of business opportunity to your whatever you're doing, your portfolio online. Because Amazon back then was in this perfect timing where it was yet to be supply catching up with demand. So there was a lot of money to be made there. And what we were doing is we could sell to business folks, but I also would then go out and I would sell it to other audiences, such as chiropractors, such as options traders. And I could change just a little bit of the webinar and change the invitation to come to the webinar. So like with the options traders, I start that webinar and I'd say, listen, would you ever go into a market where you could only buy and never sell? And they say, no. And I go, just to be clear here, I want to understand this. Would you only go into a market that you could buy but never sell? And they say, no, Jason. I say, why not? And they said, it's stupid because I'll never make any money. And then I say, how many of you shop on Amazon? And everybody's like, I shop on Amazon. So interesting. So that's a market where you're only buying, you're never selling, which is ironic because 57% of all Amazon sales come from third-party sellers, i.e. people like you or me. And then they're like, okay, you got my attention. So I'm able to adjust presentations and content very easily to different segments. So the offer, it becomes more valuable when you help somebody understand how it can be tailor-made to them or speak the language they best understand. And the webinar is very dynamic, which I like. Whereas these other funnels that you would build, they're more static. And so that's and the level of value is we got to have the greatest offer, and then we got to know how to point it and communicate it to the different segments of different marketplaces that are out there we can fish in and try to make some money from.
Love that. I love that. So we always start with the offer. Now, when I think of the offer, I think, well, I'm just going to go back to Russell. I remember the first time I saw him was with the very first 10X out in Miami, and it was a pitch. And then I went to 10X2, and it was a pitch fest. Everybody had this pitch, and that sometimes gets kind of slimy feeling. At the end, it's this multiple level pitch. Can you define an offer? And if it is that pitch, that multiple level pitch takeaway thing, I just had a guy on my 3-day, and unbelievable speaker, did phenomenal on the 3-day, from a sales standpoint, but like I'm watching it from a different, viewpoint than the audience. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, get to the point. It's like, make the offer, like tell them what it is you could do for them. And it just kind of kept going. So can we just drive into that a little bit? Because I think there's a lot of way when people think of an offer, they've seen them, and there's some they like and there's some they don't. And just one more thing, Jason, one thing I've had tremendous success on, and maybe we can interweave this into it, is when we do our webinars, we technically never sell. We give value the whole time. We let them know what we can do for them. We put the links up, but the whole time we're just basically showing them how to solve their problem without actually pitching them. There's no part of our presentation where it's like stack, or a pitch or anything like that. It's just, hey, at the end, if this is something you think will work, here's how you book a call. And that has worked phenomenal for us. It's a little different, but how do you interweave that? And what is the perfect offer or pitch? Or I don't want to say pitch because I hate that.
I love that you're bringing all this up. So, the world is very complicated and we always want to make it very simple. And so to your point, if I'm booking calls because that makes more sense for that model, then doing a hard pitch is going to fail. It's not going to be the most effective way to do it. But if I'm selling on a stage and there's 10,000 people, like at a 10X conference, right? My best bet is to bring the guns and close as hard as I possibly can, even to the point of risking offending some people.
Really?
So we have to, again, calibrate to the situation. Like Zoom brought me in to train their webinar users. It was 2 months before they IPO'd. And I came in and we had Zoom agree that here's how we pitch Zoom, by the way, to make this deal happen. We say, listen, your webinar users, if they don't do webinars, they're not going to continue to pay you for the webinar service. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. And so we said, we'll train them for free. But we also would like to extend an opportunity to do webinars for them as a done for you service where they would hire us and we'd create their webinars for them. So is it okay if we solicit? And they're like, that makes sense. Because if whether they do the webinar or you create the webinar for them, they're going to continue to be a customer of ours because they'll need to use our software in order to have these webinars delivered. So I got on and when I did the Zoom webinar, I essentially said, I'm going to cover these 5 things related to webinars today. Of these 5 things, the presentation is the most important. I don't have enough time to get into the ins and outs of the presentation, but I have a book, just like this book right here, right? One to many. So I have a book. You can download it for free if you go to whatever.com/book. And I put that right in the beginning. And then I went and trained. And after, at strategic points in that presentation, I'd say, and also this is how this relates to the presentation. If you want to know more, go here. So the funnel was very simple. Pure content, 100%, soft calls to action to get something for free. So not an offer. And then when they'd opt in to get that book for free, it was an ebook. They then on the thank you page had the ability to book a call. Would you like to talk to somebody about what it could look like if we created these for you? And the book rate on that from the live webinar was like 42%. So almost one out of two people who showed up to the webinar opted in and booked a call. Now that's a high-end service. If I'm selling $1,000 product, I have this other product that we sell. It's $500. That's all that it is. And it's how to create information products. One of the first webinars I ever created, 2008, still running to this day. Crazy longevity. And for that one, I don't need a lot of touching and hand holding. I just have to help somebody understand, does this make sense for me to buy it or not? So it's funny because Chris, in that webinar, I do the technique where I tell them up front what the agenda is. And I'll tell you how I came up with that. When I first started in webinars, I had this I didn't like what webinars represented, which was they're basically a bait and switch. They still kind of are, which is like, come here and I'll teach out of the goodness of my heart. Psych, gotcha. Now I'm going to sell you something, right?